So big box retail seems to be one of the places where we've seen the most innovation and experimentation over the last 12 months. It's a place where the stores have remained open and have had to adapt. And when we were putting together the conference and we talked about the research themes, I put a name at the top of the list as somebody I want to have speak. And so I invited Albert Vita, who is Director of In-Store Experience at the Home Depot, to come along and talk about the approaches he's been taking over a number of years when it comes to store experience and how he may be adapting that going forward. Albert, great to have you here at Retail Innovation Week.
Piers, thank you for having me. And may I also wish you and everyone watching a happy and healthy new year.
Thank you so much. We're excited to have you here. Let's start with this one. You know, Home Depot recently changed its tagline to "How Doers Get More Done." Why was that why's that significant in terms of the rethinking of the stores?
It's a great question, and Piers, the first thought would be, what's the big deal about updating your retail tagline, right? Our old one was more saving, more doing, and now we've shifted it to how doers get more done. So if you think about Home Depot and its customer base and its 41-year history, Home Depot customers are doers. They like to get their hands dirty and build stuff, right? And back in 2017, Piers, we introduced our strategic plan to how are we going to create a seamless, more convenient experience across our stores and online. And we actually called this plan One Home Depot. And so since 2017, Piers, we've made tremendous progress. And we actually believe that the time was right to showcase these capabilities, right? And so the important thing for us was, how are we going to change our tagline to match today's Home Depot? And so we start thinking about some of the capabilities that have been updated. Things like the use of mobile inside our stores. Obviously, mobile app inside a physical store is nothing new, but the capabilities that we've added to the mobile app are nothing short than mind-blowing. This idea of product location. Piers, the reality is, within our big box and within the Home Depot store experience, wayfinding is still our biggest problem. Our customers being able to find the specific nut or bolt or light bulb in a 100,000 square foot big box it's an old problem, Piers, but it's still our number one friction.
I'm sure there's a few of us nodding our heads here. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so being able to use the mobile app in terms of product location, image search, so those are some of the things that we really wanted to call out. In addition to the mobile app, we've also updated the ways how our customers can pick up their orders. So obviously, we'll get to curbside pickup in just a little bit, but certainly we start talking about BOPIS and in-store pickup lockers and really leaning into that. There are certainly some of the trends that we're seeing. And obviously, some of the investments that we've been making into our supply chain, enabling same-day delivery, some of that last mile delivery, it's some of those capabilities that Home Depot has invested heavily into are really go into and part of the DNA of the new tagline. So on the outset, more switching from more saving, more doing to how doers get more done. It's a subtle shift potentially, but for us, it was significant in terms of how are we going to showcase the new capabilities of Home Depot.
You talked about some of the capabilities that are emerging. Was there anything that was accelerated because of the pandemic and the current moment? And how did you pivot, or what things did you have to think differently?
Yeah, because of the pandemic, right? Piers, what a great question. So you take a step back, right? And we look back in the calendar back to mid-March when the stay-at-home and the quarantine first started last year. There was a lot of unknowns and a lot of chaos. And I think it's really important to notate that the Home Depot actually had to navigate over 600 regulations in terms of making sure that we were able to stay open as an essential retailer. So now, as customers were quarantined and staying at home and spending less on some of the more discretionary items, we noticed that there was a lot of investment being made into the home now that you're there, spending more time. It turns out, Piers, that 75% of all US homeowners have completed at least one home improvement project during the pandemic, right? And so you start thinking about Home Depot's assortment, right? And sure, Home Depot sells roofing and toilets and electrical wire. None of that stuff is particularly sexy. But the way I like to think about it, Piers, is let's either one of us or anyone watching, we go one day without those things, without a roof, without plumbing, without power. And you start to realize that, yes, I understand how home improvement retail could be considered essential. But to answer your question directly, right, as Americans were spending less on meals out and travel and entertainment, we learned that they were spending more on home improvements. Two particular areas that we've noticed looking across the industry were appliances, that a lot of customers were thinking about, hey, from a refrigerator or a freezer perspective, and even outdoor things like fire pits and outdoor kitchens. And again, you're spending more time at home. And so how are you going to be investing, back in the home? But at the end of the day, obviously, when we start thinking about how Home Depot had to pivot during the pandemic, two priorities really emerged, especially in the beginning. The first one was safety, and that hasn't changed, even to today. How are we going to keep our customers and our associates safe? And then certainly from an essential retailer perspective, how did we want to make sure that we maintain that status? And so, but your question was, how has Home Depot changed? And one point I really would like to make is the perspective on what has not changed. And so as we think about the turmoil and all of the transition from 2020, part of the perspective I like to bring is making sure that we focus on what hasn't changed. Our customers are valuing innovative products. Product is certainly king when it comes to home improvement shopping. And the innovative product really matters to our customers as well. Everyday low prices. Pricing still matters. And so how are we making sure that we're bringing the best prices and the best products to our customers? And then there's really a third component here, Piers, which is around how-to, knowledgeable how-to. And again, how do we communicate, and what's that vehicle to get you the how-to, whether it's mobile or online or inside a store? At the end of the day, there are still some elements of that shopping experience, Piers, that have not changed. And so those are some areas that I like to lean into as well.
We have executives in retail, executives at brands. We have plenty of change makers who work in the ecosystem around retail. As they think about their businesses in 2021, this year and beyond, are there some kind of guiding principles or some strategies that they should pursue to keep themselves relevant?
So the question is, how should retail leaders think, or what should they do to make sure that they stay relevant moving forward? Yeah. I love that question, and you start thinking about the knee-jerk reaction in terms of how do retailers stay relevant looking into the future. You start thinking about potentially talking about emerging technology, or again, looking at the competitive landscape. But Piers, to answer your question, if there was really where I would start, and if I could talk, through the screen to my peers that might be watching your show here, is the one thing I'd recommend is making sure we gauge our mindset. Right? From a retail leadership perspective, my recommendation is that we gauge our mindset. And what I mean by that, Piers, is really when you start talking about mindset, you could either be talking about a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, right? And my deep belief, Piers, is that the output of a retail experience, of a store experience, never will outpace or never rise above the level or the quality of the mindset of the retail leaders that are leading that organization. So, for example, are we truly thinking about our retail experience from a position of abundance, where we're thinking about how do we truly 10x innovate the experience, or is it scarcity, right? Where we start thinking about how do we protect what we have, right? And how do we keep things close to the vest? And so for me, and we start talking about mindset, one of the key components of mindset as well, right, and is the level of questions that the retail leader brings to their job and to that in-store experience or that retail experience. And what I mean by that is, Piers, we both know that anyone watching this is looking for answers, looking for key takeaways that they can run with immediately. And I want to go on the record with you, Pearson, saying that the real power is not necessarily in coming to the table with the answers, but focusing on the questions. Are we even focusing on the most powerful and the most relevant questions, right? Because ultimately, I just feel that, I'll give you an example, right? If we were going to have a discussion around, okay, Albert, how do we increase the use of mobile, inside our physical store environment? It's a good question. However, my feeling is that you're already coming at it assuming that mobile and that particular technology, is part of the solution. And I'm just saying that ultimately, and this shapes the mindset is being open to and being aware of what is the mindset that you're bringing to the job, as well as what are the underlying questions that the retailer is even trying to answer as they go to market. Ultimately, I feel when you start talking about retail innovation, Piers, innovation when done correctly, to me, is a heroic act. It fundamentally is a heroic act because it takes courage to look at the status quo and to challenge it, right? So ultimately, I just feel like checking what is the level of your mindset as you bring it to the office or bring it to work, and then what are the fundamental or underlying questions that you are bringing to work as well. So those would be my recommendations.
Um, it's fascinating. I'm sure you could create your own course here. You've been developing stores and store experience for quite a while now, and there must be innovation. You must have seen innovation come and go, and these hot topics such as store of the future come and go and return again. Are there any innovation traps that retailer leaders fall into when they're rethinking the role of the store?
What a great question. You start talking about innovation traps. And Piers, in full transparency, I wouldn't consider myself an innovation expert, but I am someone that has, for the past 7 years, lived in the trenches in terms of thinking about in-store experience, measuring innovation, and really trying to push the needle with a human-centered and customer back thinking. And so from an innovation trap perspective, there are really four innovation traps that I've just learned from my experience, and I'm happy to share them with you. The first one is what I would call the friction trap, Piers. And what I mean by the friction trap is that retailers, in an effort to reduce friction, introduce experiences that might actually end up creating more friction, right? So, for example, hey, let's put a kiosk, into this situation, or let's introduce digital into this situation, right? And so, but the reality is that by doing those types of digital moves and making those types of moves, and if you're not really thinking them through carefully, you could actually increase the level of friction in the store. So that's trap number one. The number two is what I would call the associate experience trap, Pierce. And what I mean by that is that we both know that in this day and age, customer experience is the buzzword, and CX commonly gets the spotlight. But in my experience and a lot of my discussions with my peers, it's that it's often the associate experience that really determines the success of that test or that innovation. Are we really thinking about how is the associate in the store using this tool or using this to sell the product in the store? So that is another trap that I've commonly seen. The third one is what I would like to call the over competition trap. And what I mean by that is that when it comes to customer experience, Pierce, we compete with everybody. And I'll give you an example. So if you're a grocer, a lot of the times you look at other grocery chains, as your primary, competition. If you're in apparel, right, you look at other apparel retailers as your primary competition. And what I mean by over competition, it's that, again, also related back to my point about mindset and making sure that we're approaching business with a truly broad mindset around when it comes to customer experience, we are competing with everybody. And the idea would be, is there a opportunity for learning? And really the fourth trap that that's coming to mind is what I would call the time trap, right? And so, Piers, we talk a lot about time is money, right? And time is money. And so, but the reality in my experience is that's not true, right? And that time is actually the new currency, and in my opinion, more valuable in the sense that it's the most precious, non-renewable resource. So starting to think about, okay, as customers are engaging your brand and coming to your in-store experience, how are we thinking about speed, right? And how are we thinking about how do we actually help our customers find the right item for them at that right time? And again, starting to think about point of sale and payments and all of those things, and that really end-to-end journey, right, around time and speed. So for me, I just feel like there are certainly lots and lots of lessons that I've learned from working on Home Depot's pilot store initiative and some of the other in-store experiences that I've worked on for Home Depot. But those are some of the common ones that I'm happy to share.
That's great. I appreciate your candid sharing of some of those key learnings from your experience. Albert Vita, Director of In-Store Experience at the Home Depot, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being part of Retail Innovation.
Thank you for having me, Piers. Take care.